Good morning, everybody. Roger Suzanne here, checking in live from the digital desk where we are tracking major breaking news. 14 train cars derailed in Mansfield. Some of those cars are now in the river. We're joined right now live by Luke Hydash, who is your reporter live at the scene. So, Luke, what can you tell us about what's going on out there right now in Mansfield?
Roger, quite the large emergency response right now. Give you a look down here along those tracks where those 14 cars derailed a little bit earlier this morning. We know at least 5 of them, DEEP tells us, have actually gone down into the Willimantic River, which is a little bit beyond those tracks there. Now, we do know that there is a shelter-in-place order for a half-mile radius of 1090 Stafford Road, and that is for possible hazardous gas leak. Now, there are a number of cars that have gone off the tracks here, and we know that they're carrying a variety of things, some propane, some lumber, some grain, some grease, and because of that propane, well, that is why that shelter in place is being ordered right now as emergency crews arrive here and assess this situation and figure out exactly what the course of action is going to be over the next few hours as they try and get these cars upright, back out of the water even, and onto the tracks. But again, that half-mile radius of this area of 1090 Stafford Road is where that shelter in place has been ordered. There was talk a little bit earlier this morning of doing an evacuation for that half-mile radius, but that has since been scaled back to that shelter in place as emergency crews get here and figure out the best course of action over the next few hours.
And Luke, thank you for setting the stage for us. I do want to ask you, obviously Mansfield is a relatively rural community. What is the area like where these crews are working at right now, where this derailment happened? Is it a place where a lot of people live, or is it relatively remote?
A lot of farmland, very remote. Of course, there are homes in this area, not too many. We're a couple of miles away from the main Yukon Stores campus. We're between the routes here of 44 and down near Eagleville, Route 275. So it's a big stretch of 32 that's closed right now as emergency crews get here and assess this situation and make sure that everybody is safe. We have heard, of course, that no injuries were reported in all of this. Of course, this being a freight train, only imagine the crew was aboard. Have not heard how many people were on these trains here as this came off, but again, no injuries this morning here in Mansfield.
Yeah, Luke, that is certainly the good news that no one was hurt. I do have to ask you, though, we mentioned the possible environmental impact. I know Deep is on the scene. We're talking about liquefied natural gas. It's unclear, at least from our vantage point, if any of that liquefied natural gas may have spilled. In fact, I can tell you the New England Central Railroad has issued a statement saying that there's no indication that the cars are leaking, but obviously Deep's still taking this situation very seriously. Have they talked at all about what the possible environmental impact could be?
I think that's something that they are still assessing right now and trying to figure out. Of course, we are fairly close to this scene where this happened right now. And given the fact that they're allowing the people who live and work around here to stay in their homes and shelter in place, that tells me that there's really no immediate danger. We have not heard exactly whether or not any of these cars did break or leak or have a crack in it, anything along those lines when they went off the tracks earlier this morning.
Now,
but
Luke,
of course, going off that earlier with DEP, you were saying, Roger, a second ago, with them being here, the other component to this is the Willimantic River is right down there beyond the tracks, and we know at least 5 of the train cars are, in fact, in the river or on the bank going down to the river, and that is another reason DEP is here to assess that situation as well.
Luke, obviously you and photographer Al Worst have been doing a good job showing us not only the site of the derailment, but you also were showing us how many emergency responders are there on the scene. Do you have any idea of just how many agencies could be involved, or is this a situation that is kind of still growing by the minute?
Yeah, of course, this is growing by the minute. We're seeing emergency crews get here. Every few minutes, it seems like another set of flashing lights show up. We've seen crews as far as Putnam here is now. And, of course, a lot of times in these situations, you have these task forces and regional groups, all these agencies that work together in case there is an emergency situation like this to get it resolved. The other thing to contend with here is where all of those vehicles are lined up, where all those first responders have had to park, there's a bit of a distance between Route 32 itself and going down to the tracks. It's kind of a large field. I got to imagine it's farmland here. So they had the backhoe going through here earlier, kind of plowing and clearing out some of the snow so that they can get more vehicles and more equipment down to the tracks itself to deal with this situation.
Yeah, and Luke, a firefighter at the scene, did text me that Yukon Fire Department's hazmat unit has responded, as well as Tolland Fire Department, Mohegan Tribe's hazmat unit as well. All there. Probably just a small sampling of the folks that are there. Luke, I know you don't have a map on you or anything like that, but how close is this to the Yukon campus? Is it relatively in close proximity, or are you pretty far away?
You know, if I had to guess, I would say we're about a good 2 or 3 miles away. Of course, that's the other big component of this, is how big of a chunk of Route 32 is shut down and closed right now. We're talking the areas between Route 44 and 275 down in Eagleville, which is, of course, a very small part of Mansfield. So it's a large stretch of the road here that's closed, and there are some smaller neighborhood roads that go up towards the main Yukon Stores campus, but I would say we're a good 2 miles or so away from there. We did hear from Yukon officials a little bit earlier this morning who said that, yes, of course, they're aware and tracking and staying on top of this situation, but they have not heard of any impact to their main campus right now.
And again, if you're just joining us, this is special coverage of a major breaking news stories. 14 train cars carrying liquefied natural gas derailed in Mansfield. You can see photographer Al Worst showing us a live look at the scene right now. Just to give you some background on the area where this is all playing out, this is a single track area and was used for very limited passenger service until 1995. That's according to Channel 3's Patrick Boots. And there is a proposal right now for a new service on the line, but the state said the track needs some serious rehab before allowing passenger service. Obviously, this is a freight train derailment, although, Luke, you have been keeping us up to speed right now. The really maybe most important news is that no injuries have been reported, and we have not heard anything about crew members at this hour, right, Luke?
Right, but you got to imagine on these types of freight trains, there isn't too big of a large freight crew itself that's helping kind of man these operations themselves. And we have heard from the Connecticut Division of Emergency Management that on these cars there was propane, lumber, grain, and grease. So that's just a small sampling of what came off the tracks a little bit earlier this morning here in Mansfield, very parallel to Route 32. Going back to what you mentioned a second ago, Roger, about how the talk of the possibility of passenger service, I did a story about that last summer, and it was actually down in Willimantic where these tracks connect down to. And the people there said, yes, you know, we'd love to have the passenger rail service. The town says, yes, we'd love to have the passenger rail service, but you're right, kind of the infrastructure was a big obstacle in terms of whether or not that was going to be feasible.
Yeah, that's right, Luke. And we're looking at some of the emergency responders down now live again, this train derailment in Mansfield. I do want to get back to that New England Central Railroad statement. What they've told us is that at least 2 cars derailed. We now know it's about 14 cars derailed from the rail there, and many are on the bank of the Willimantic River. Others are actually in the water. The most important thing, according to New England Central Railroad, of course, there are no injuries. And at one point, as Luke has been pointing out, there was some thought that they would need to evacuate the area. That is no longer the case, but there is a shelter-in-place order that has been instituted for about a half-mile radius of this train derailment. But again, no evacuations have been made at this time. And Luke, I know you've been talking with a lot of the decision makers here as you've been here live at the scene. Do you know what went into that decision at all? Because earlier there was some talk that perhaps they would evacuate, but it was town leaders that were the ones that said, no, we think a shelter in place is sufficient, right?
That sounds about right, Roger. Right now, we're seeing crews go down there and assess the situation and kind of come up with the plans over the next few hours. So I got to imagine that's being relayed to those decision makers about how dangerous and how immediate this situation is in the meantime.
All right, Luke Hydash, I know you have a lot more information that you're going to try to gather before we go on the air again at noon with Kara Sundlin, again covering this major breaking story. If you're just joining us, 14 train cars carrying liquefied natural gas derailed in Mansfield. Some of those cars we know are down in the Willimantic River. We know DEEP is on the scene investigating as a possible hazmat situation, although right now there is no evidence that any of that liquefied natural gas actually leaked out of any of the cars. That's according to New England Central Railroad. And again, the best news of all is despite this pretty wild scene here in Mansfield. There are no reported injuries. We're still waiting to get an update from the crew. All right, Luke, thank you so much for all of that input, and we'll see you again at noon. All right, listen, we are going to be
Thanks, Roger.
all over this story throughout the day, of course, here on Channel 3. We'll keep you updated on any new developments. As soon as we get any information, we'll share it with you right away on air, online, and here from the Channel 3 digital desk. And, of course, join us for more continuing coverage of this big breaking story in Mansfield on Eyewitness News at noon. Until then, have a fantastic Thursday, everybody. We'll see you real soon.